Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back again, and today I want to talk about Playboi Carti. I know, what an original and interesting idea that nobody else on YouTube has ever covered before. However, I promise you I actually have a good reason for talking about him today, because I feel like him, alongside the two other members of Splur Gang, going by the name of Thousand Man Fauni and Uno the Activist, very well represent the three different paths you can take in the rap game. Now, I know right off the bat that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I promise by the end of this video you'll understand exactly the point I'm trying to make. But for right now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of context about this group. So Splur Gang was a short-lived collective that was formed sometime around late 2014 to early 2015, comprised of three main members, being Thousand Man Fauni, Uno the Activist, and of course the most famous of the bunch, Playboi Carti. At the time that the group was formed up, Uno the Activist was actually the most popular of the three of them, with him gaining quite a bit of buzz within the Atlanta area for dropping a song called Parking Lot Pimping. And the reason this song became so popular is because it ended up getting picked up by a pretty big rap playlist on SoundCloud going by the name of Hot New Hip Hop, and after it was placed on there, it would gain enough popularity to be played in the clubs all over the city, immediately turning Uno into an overnight sensation that was selling out shows left and right. After that, he would start to get some music on the Elevator channel, which would only push his numbers farther. Eventually, him and Thousand Man Fauni ended up dropping a collaboration mixtape going by the name of For Christ's Sake, with every song off of that project going on to do numbers, and at that point, Uno definitely felt like he had made it. And keep in mind, this was back in 2015, right before the SoundCloud wave really started to pick up in a big way. And don't get me wrong, there were a couple of rappers who had already blown up off the app at this point, like Famous Dex as well as Lucky, but nobody had really made it to that big mainstream level yet. So as far as everybody knew at the time, this was basically as big as you could get off of SoundCloud. I don't think anybody realized that if they pushed it far enough, they would actually be able to get into the mainstream rap industry, and they probably only looked at it as a fast way to make money, get a little bit of clout in the underground, and, well, do a bunch of drugs and mess with a bunch of women, because after all, once a guy is famous enough that he can pull women without having to try, they start to get a little bit lazy, and that's exactly what started to happen to Uno. And I feel like all of this led Uno to have three big issues in his early career: complacency from lack of ambition because he was comfortable where he was at, cockiness that comes from him being one of the early pioneers of this wave, because it came to the point that when new artists were coming out and wanting to work with him, he would actually turn them down because he felt like he was already a much bigger artist than them, so there was no real reason to go down to their level and create a song with them, even though some of these artists would go on to become a lot bigger than him in future years. And the final big issue that really plagued his career early on was short-sightedness. He was already popping, he already felt like he had made it, but he didn't think about what he should do next. What should he do to build his brand? What should he do to expand outside of his city? What should he do to change up his sound or make some different music that maybe will pull in more fans? But for some reason, he didn't really seem to be dropping music at all. He put out a couple songs here and there, but there was big massive gaps between releases, and even though he did have that one mixtape that was doing super well, he definitely should have kept his foot on the gas and kept putting out more hits, because after all, when good things start to happen to you, that's not the time to chill out and relax. That's the time to keep working even harder, because while you might feel like you're getting big blessings at the time, there might be even bigger blessings coming for you in the future. It's not very often that you get the opportunity to really do something big with your life, and when you have that window of opportunity, you have to do absolutely everything you can to make sure you make the most of it, because it can close before you know it. And that's basically exactly what happened to Uno, although that's not telling the full story, because if you know anything about Uno the Activist and Playboi Carti, you know that Playboi Carti ended up switching up on him and leaving him in the dust. And while I'm not blaming Uno for this, I mean, after all, he put a lot of trust in somebody who he saw as a close friend to take him to the top alongside him. He should have been a little bit more competitive when it came to getting the favor of the ASAP mob. But before we get into that, I want to go back to Playboi Carti for a minute, because similarly to Uno, he got his start around 2014, dropping a couple tracks on SoundCloud that didn't really do anything for him at the time. However, he was eventually able to get picked up by Awful Records, which really helped to push his movement early on, with them allowing him to perform at some of their shows, which really helped to get his name out there in the early days. And because Awful Records was already such an established brand, it really helped Playboi Carti get attention outside of his home city of Atlanta, which is something that every rapper should want, although most artists really only want to be popping in their hometown, because after all, the people that you know are going to see that you have clout now, and that's going to feel pretty good. However, once again, that's a very short-sighted way to look at your career. You really got to decide early on. Do you want to be big in your city, or do you actually want to be big? Do you want to be a generational artist, or do you want to be a hometown hero? Don't get me wrong, always show love to the place that you came from, but you also want to have fans all over the rest of the state, as well as the rest of the country, and hopefully the entire world. Closing yourself off too early in your career can really end up hurting you in the long run, because if you end up falling out of favor and are no longer popular in your own city, there's really nowhere else to go. So Carti was definitely pretty intelligent to take the chance when he got it. He definitely could have stayed making music in Atlanta, probably dropped a bunch of songs with Uno, and that would have helped him become bigger within that one area, but he decided to play the long game. While Uno was trying to get short-term satisfaction from all of the clout, money, women, and drugs that he was getting from his moment in the sun, Playboi Carti was looking at the rap game as a long-term plan, with hopes of building himself up bit by bit and connecting on to anybody who could give him more attention and a bigger platform than he already had. In a way, it's kind of commendable, but once you see the way that Playboi Carti went about doing this, you're definitely going to lose a little bit of respect, or maybe you'll gain more respect. It really depends how you look at life. Okay, so now we were able to establish both Uno the activist and Playboi Carti. Now let's go on to establish the third character, which is Thousand Man Fauni. Now, if you want to know about his entire story, I actually made a full video on him. I also made a full video on Uno, but honestly, it's kind of old and not that good. But that Fauni one is pretty recent and it definitely still holds up, so if you want to check it out, be my guest. But to make a long story short, Fauni basically was the last rapper to join into the group. Both Uno and Carti already had a couple songs out in late 2014, where Fauni only really came into the picture around mid 2015. I mean, don't get me wrong, he had dabbled a little bit with music in 2011, but it wasn't the signature style that we would soon know the group for, and he really only took on that sort of sound after he got to know Uno and Carti. So he was kind of the third man in, and because of that, he never really got as popular as the other two, although it doesn't really seem like that ever bothered him, and he was basically along for the ride. But with all three members now established, we can finally talk about the Splur Gang era, because after all, it's one of the most legendary collectives to ever touch the underground scene, even though they never really made a whole lot of music together. I mean, they do have one track with all three of them together, but besides that, it was really a lot of Fauni and Uno making music together, as well as Carti and Uno making music. You never really seen Carti and Fauni hop on a track besides the one time. Although this really comes across like he was only throwing him a bone because he was officially part of the group and not like he actually wanted to fuck with him. I'm not sure if Fauni and Carti were ever really close like that, but we can at least see that Fauni had quite a bit of loyalty to Carti because he actually ended up doing a hit for him. I mean, he didn't end up killing anybody, but he shot at a couple people for Carti, so it definitely seems like he at least considered him a friend, where Carti might have not felt the same way. But no matter how these guys all felt about each other behind the scenes, the group already kind of felt a little bit segmented and awkward before it even got off the ground. I mean, people definitely look back fondly on this music, but it never really felt like they were all moving as a team. And this all came down to the fact that Playboi Carti ended up leaving Awful Records before they could sign him into a concrete deal, which gave Carti the opportunity to connect with a fashion designer going by the name of Ian Connor, who would eventually connect him to ASAP Rocky and the rest of the mob, which was definitely a pretty big opportunity for him. So as you can see, while Carti definitely is being a little bit snaky, basically using Awful Records to get his name out there before then leaving to get a bigger deal, and while on a human level that's definitely a pretty shitty thing to do, when you look at it from an artist perspective, Carti was making all the right moves to put himself in a better position in his career. And while Fauni was basically getting left in the dust, it at least seemed like for a minute Carti was actually going to bring Uno along with him. And I think this is where you can once again see that Uno is way too comfortable with where his career was. He really put a lot of trust in Carti to get him in with the mob and eventually help him blow up. However, Uno definitely put way too much faith into Carti, and once again, I know a lot of people are going to feel bad for him for the way that Carti stabbed him in the back, but when it comes to the music industry, it's a very cutthroat game. Unfortunately, clout is currency when it comes to hip hop, and if you don't have any leverage that you can use to keep yourself in a good position, people are going to be able to walk over you and basically disregard you. And like I said before, it's not like Uno didn't have anything to his name. He was popping within the city, and he definitely was doing good numbers on SoundCloud and Elevator, but it wasn't like he was big enough that the ASAP mob couldn't pass him up. And unfortunately, he couldn't keep his eye on the ball. Right when he was at the finish line of getting the opportunity to blow up as a big rapper, he would unfortunately fall for one of his vices by fucking with the same woman as somebody else in the group going by the name of Bloody Dior, and this led to a very violent confrontation where Uno was unfortunately shot and hospitalized. And this is really where the screw job took place, because after Uno ended up in the hospital, he really thought that Carti was going to take his side and go down with Splur Gang and not fuck with the mob anymore, but of course Carti was already in too deep and he wasn't going to turn his back on it now. I mean, this is the thing, when it comes to your friends, you always expect that they're gonna pick loyalty over money. You always think that they're gonna ride with you because after all, they've been riding with you for this long. There's no reason to switch up. But once there's a big bag being dangled in their face, they really start to show their true colors. And in Carti's eyes, as fucked up as this whole situation was, he really didn't see it as any of his business. After all, he had brought Uno in. He was trying to put him in a better position, and Uno ended up fucking that up by fucking with the same girl as Bloody Dior. Now, is this actually true? Well, nobody can say for sure, but that was probably the way that Playboi Carti was looking at it. Once you have to do terrible actions to get where you want to go, you often end up justifying yourself. But that justification was only going to get him so far because, of course, Uno was pissed. He felt like he was betrayed by one of his best friends, and he would immediately start tweeting at him, calling him out for switching up. And when you look at the DMs between the two of them, it really comes across like Carti doesn't even understand why Uno is upset in the first place, with him basically saying that he was only trying to get clout off of his name and that he was only trying to start beef for attention, which is pretty sociopathic. But unfortunately, when it comes to the rap game and the music industry or even the entertainment industry, this type of behavior is rewarded time and time again. Unfortunately, there's no friends in the industry, and the only connections that a lot of these big time artists have are to people who can benefit them in one way or another, and if they can't benefit them, well, they end up getting cut off and left in the dirt. And that's exactly what ended up happening to Uno. After this point, Carti wouldn't even acknowledge him, and while Uno continued to try to diss him over and over again, unfortunately history would forget about this beef for a while, leading Uno to look like he was obsessed with Carti, as well as people saying that he was only coming after him because he was salty that he didn't get as big as Carti. And that's the unfortunate part when it comes to beefs like this. You don't even have to be morally correct. As long as you have more clout than the other person, everybody will completely ignore them and take your side. And I'm not trying to say that this moment completely destroyed Uno's career. I mean, he still has a very dedicated fan base, his music still does pretty well on streaming services, and he's still able to sell out pretty decent sized shows. However, it did put a cap on just how big he could get, with most people only seeing him as Playboi Carti's forgotten sidekick, which is very unfortunate. However, I definitely do think that there's a lesson to learn here, that when you're an upcoming artist who first starts to gain attention, you need to keep your foot on the gas and keep making more and more, feeding your fans and making sure to always stay in the public eye. Once you start climbing that mountain in the industry and finally get your first big hit, you need to be ready for another mountain to come after it, because as hard as it is to gain relevancy in the rap game, keeping it is even more difficult. And as tantalizing and comfortable as it might be to stay in that same position and keep enjoying the fruits of your labor, you always have to be striving for more, thinking about your next move and how you can push your career to the next level, because unfortunately, even if you want to stay in the same position, this moment won't last forever. So if you can help it, as hard as it might be, never get complacent. If you start to gain a buzz, you need to keep rolling with that for the next couple years. Eventually, after you've been in the game for 3 to 5 years, you might be able to calm down a little bit, but if you really want it, then you got to keep working. And if Uno only stayed complacent, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but the issue was that he also got cocky. He ended up turning down opportunities that he shouldn't have because he felt like he was too big for them. And one thing you got to know about the rap game is one moment you can be the biggest artist in the room, and the next you're old news that nobody gives a fuck about anymore. So don't burn bridges that you don't have to, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. As shitty of a thing that it was that Carti did to Uno, Uno also shouldn't have put all of his faith in Carti. I mean, I understand why he did so, but the entire time that he was blowing up, he should have been building other connections with different artists. Unfortunately, when it comes to the game, you got to be prepared to be stabbed in the back at any moment, and if you do get stabbed in the back, you have to have a backup plan. I mean, fuck, look at X. He basically ended up putting all his homies on, and once they got a little bit of relevancy and money, they completely left him in the dirt as well. It's unfortunately very common, and that's why Uno's story really represents the one path that you can take in the rap game that's all about ego, where you think you're too big for everybody, you get complacent, you get comfortable, and you never get any bigger. But Fauni represents a completely different path that's basically the exact opposite, where Uno didn't care enough about his career. Fauni cared way too much about things that didn't really matter and shouldn't have affected him. Because unlike Uno and Carti, who are only tangentially connected to gangs, Thousand Man Fauni was really out there in the streets doing work. And because of that, once he started to gain clout and make legal money, he didn't know what to do with himself, and he would continue to carry himself the same way that he always did, which is definitely not the best choice when it comes to being an artist, because after all, you have a reputation to uphold, and you don't want to be starting beefs with other people in the industry because they can and will blackball you. And that's exactly what ended up happening to Fauni. When the whole beef between Carti and Uno went down, he ended up taking Uno's side, which does make sense. I mean, after all, Carti wasn't really fucking fucking with him like that in the first place, so you're gonna go with the friend that's been there for you. However, it kind of feels like Fauni is loyal to a fault, with him getting into beefs with people that quickly turned violent for absolutely no reason whatsoever. He ended up getting in some sort of petty beef with D Savage, which we don't even know the reason behind, and then he shot at him at a store, which might be an okay thing for a gangster to do, but when you're supposed to be a rapper who cares about your fans, shooting at them is definitely not the best idea. On top of that, he also tried to go to Yams Day before then being stopped by security and arrested. We're not really sure if he was trying to go there because he really wanted to see the ASAP mob, or maybe he was trying to get at Carti, but either way, wasn't a good choice to make. But the absolute most destructive choice that he made during his entire career was getting into a beef with Lil Yachty, where he actually ended up shooting at him as well. And if you don't know, Lil Yachty actually has an uncle who's a very high up figure in the music industry, and after he was told about the antics that Fauni was pulling, he ended up blackballing him in the industry alongside D Savage, and that basically put an end to his career. And of course, just like Uno, he still has a very hardcore underground fan base, but he was never able to hit that mainstream level because he was taking all of the beef that he had before he got famous way too seriously. I mean, I get it, it's not that easy to simply leave a gang and leave it all behind, but when you're making money and you're doing well in life, there's no reason to put yourself down on the level of people like that. You should be trying to strive to be better and keep yourself out of trouble. It's a very destructive mentality because once you start to make money and get fame, of course you're going to start to build a bit of an ego, and of course you're going to want to shit on all the people who talked bad about you before you found that fame. But the best course of action to take in that situation is to simply leave those people in the gutter. They're not worth your time or effort, and all you're going to get out of beefing with them is being drugged back down to their level, which is not where you want to be. I mean, you spent your entire career trying to get yourself out of that slum, so why put yourself back in there after you're already doing well for yourself? Unfortunately, I feel like Fauni just really didn't understand the music industry. I think he expected it to operate the same way that a gang does, where loyalty is the most important thing, but unfortunately when it comes to making money in the music industry, like I said before, people get snaky. And this snake behavior really got to him, leading him to lash out, with him thinking that this would probably make him look better as he was the one that was staying loyal to his own people and Carti and Yachty weren't. But once again, the two of them have more clout and more connections in the industry, meaning that they were basically able to control the entire narrative, and with Fauni being way too high most of the time to actually articulate himself, he wasn't really able to make a good point for his own side of the story. And this once again shows a trap that many artists fall into, where they can't leave their old life behind and they continue to be spiteful and hateful. As hard as it might be to ignore all the people talking shit about you once you start to gain fame, you really have to do so and look at all of this as a blessing, as after all, not everybody gets an opportunity like this to really have their music heard by the masses. And if you really do get that opportunity, you gotta wake up every day and thank God that you have it. Really try to look at it from a positive perspective, because as soon as you start getting negative and fighting with people, it's only going to cause people to become even more angry at you. It's a slippery slope and a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's unfortunately one that Fauni ended up falling into. Nowadays, he's definitely a lot more chill than he was back then, but unfortunately, like I said with Uno, you only get that one window opportunity to really make it as a big artist, and unfortunately, Fauni missed his shot, only leaving Carti behind. The one who acted the most outwardly malicious to both of his friends, the one who ended up snaking multiple different people, the one who took every opportunity he could to gain more clout and not care about people's feelings, and he's the one who ended up winning out. Carti is now one of the biggest artists in the game, and absolutely nobody cares that he's a piece of shit behind the scenes, because once you gain enough fame and relevancy, you basically can't be touched anymore. I mean, people can get torn down if they do really terrible things like Diddy, but when it comes to Carti, he would have to do something life-changing to ever be torn down. And even then, people would probably still fuck with him, because after all, a lot of underground fans really don't give a shit if you're a terrible person. And that leads us to our third and final type of artist, the person who does what they have to do to gain fame by any means. Because when you look at it, Carti is basically the complete opposite of both Fauni and Uno. Unlike Uno, he never got a big head and he was willing to suck up to bigger artists than him like ASAP Rocky. He was never just comfortable with staying in the same city and only being famous in one spot, with him constantly trying to expand his career in any way that he could. Unlike Fauni, he never let beef and bullshit get in the way of his career, with him basically ignoring everybody who had an issue with him. He always dreamed big, he always wanted more, he never let women get in between him and his music, he never got too hard on drugs, and just overall, he ended up playing the game perfectly, and it ended up panning out in the long run. But unfortunately, to gain all that fame and money, he would have to sell out his own morals and not have any loyalty to anybody whatsoever, which is not something you can say about Fauni and Uno. They're both so very loyal to their friends. However, the industry does not reward loyalty, it does not reward kindness, and oftentimes the artists who end up making it the biggest are the people who are able to put all of that to the side and only focus on their own goals, being completely selfish, which is honestly kind of sad, but unfortunately that is the reality of the music industry, and I think it couldn't be better illustrated by any other group besides Uno, Fauni, and Carti. So for all of you aspiring artists, I really hope that you take a good listen to this video and think about just how far you want to go. Do you want to be like Uno and Fauni, who get left in the underground and never make as much money as those big time artists? Or are you willing to sell your soul if it means that you can be the biggest in the world? Well, unfortunately, I can't answer that question for you, so I'm going to leave it up for you guys to discuss in the comments below. And with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Delete This gang is stronger than ever. Leave delete this in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and besides that, thank you for watching. Peace out.